In today's video, I made Flappy Bird in under an hour. I started off by drawing a cube for the player and I colored it blue. I then added an outline, made the corners round, and sized it down a bit. Now I need to give it a face, so I gave it 2 eyes and a mouth, and now I'll just add a highlight and give that a rounded corner, and we're basically done. Now I just need to give it a shadow under it, and I think this is looking pretty nice, but if I can get it just a little darker and in the right spot, I think that's great. Now I see this little defect here, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that, and it looks perfect. Now let's get coding. We're gonna want to start with a when I receive block, and we are going to receive the message start game. Now we can begin with the player movement code. I started off by just checking if the space key is pressed and moving the player up. In another loop, I made the player constantly move down, and I messed around with the values for a while until I realized it was not going to work, so I created a y velocity variable, changed up the rotation so that it would act like actual Flappy Bird, and voila, it's perfect. As you can see here, I'm jumping and it is working as intended. Now it is time to make the pipes. I just started off by using the player as a color palette. Now I'm drawing a rectangle and rounding the edges for the majority of the pipe. I just added this little stubby bit behind the majority of the pipe, and now I added the top of the pipe. I changed up the colors but ended up not liking it, so I put it back. Now I'm just going to quickly add some highlights and make sure I round the corners. I did one for all 3, and I'm going to try and make sure the corners are round, and I think it is looking great. Now let's just give it a drop shadow, move it over a bit, and now we just need to copy it, move it up, and adjust the positions. I then started making some code, and I kinda just threw it together. It's kind of magical that it actually works. But now that we got one of the most important parts of the game done, let's move on to the actual UI, which now we will be doing and making the play button. As I've been doing throughout the video, I will make a blue rectangle with rounded corners and give it highlights on the top left. But on this button, I will actually give it a highlight on every corner, and then after I've done this, I will add in some text that says play. I will give that a back shadow and just move it around to the right position. Now I'll give the entire button a back shadow and make sure it is the correct color. Now that I have done that, all that's left is to copy it and change the text to restart. Now that we have done that, this part of the UI is done. Now that I have done the UI, I wanted to start working on the code for the UI itself. So I just started by making a switch to the right costume and go to a position on the screen. Now it is checking to see if I'm touching the mouse pointer, and if so, it will update its size. It'll also just make it brighter, and now if the mouse is down, it will start the game. Now that I've done that, I went ahead and updated it a little bit with some better sizing, but you'll see that later. Now what we're going to do is attempt to make a background. I thought maybe I'd make mountains in the background using triangles, but as you'll see in a moment, it didn't turn out too terribly great. I started by making this one large triangle and filling it in, and it didn't look very good, but I continued to duplicate it and change the colors up a bit. I then put a solid background color behind it, and that's the moment I realized this was not gonna work. I changed the size to try and make it work, added some highlights to each triangle, but still it wouldn't work because honestly, I'm just kinda bad at art. I then went on to add the score after just changing the background to a simple solid color. I added the score variable and tested it out, and it looks like it's working, sort of, except it was adding way too many points. After fixing that, it still wouldn't work, so I had to fix it a couple more times till finally it's done. If you want to find the game, go to my profile on Scratch and go to Rectangular. It should be in version 1.1 or 1.2, but even if it's not, it's still a spectacular game. Here it is, and you can play to your heart's desire.